The process that it took to get here was a mess and a half. I have a witness. Literally the worst experience of my life. I want a refund on my time, on my energy, and I need a new foot because I stepped on a stupid button. So, that's how today's video is starting. Hello, kings, queens, and royalty in between, and welcome to my pocket of the internet. It's been a while. Hey. I've just been going through the ringer, my man. There's been some stuff that's been going on in my personal life involving some people, and there's been some stuff going on with work that's just got me all over the place. I've been in a slump. The slump was slumping, my man. The slump was slumping. And I have just been trying to catch up. So here I am. We are in a new filming setup, as you can see. I tried to test this out today, but the process to get here, I'm still deciding if it was worth it or not. So, but today we are going to be doing my 2024 end of the year book tag. And I'm so excited. I love watching the, oh, don't mind me, I'm just squeezing some clippers for emotional support, I guess. I don't know. I love watching these videos. I love seeing people's opinions about the books that they read, and I love seeing what people are like,
oh my gosh, this is the best book of the year.
And then other people being like,
excuse me, that was the opinion that you had.
And it was wrong, and it's so funny. So I'm going to be sharing my opinions about books that I read this year, as well as telling you that I'm right, you're wrong, shut up.
I'm right, you're wrong, shut up, bitch.
As the great Yu-Ji Liang would say. So, let's get started, shall we? Before we get started, I got my questions from both Larry Reeds and Madison Kate. They are wonderful YouTubers, and I just kind of combined their questions together because there were some that I liked from this one and some that I liked from the other one. And so I would recommend those videos. The first question is most disappointing read of the year. Now, I'll have to give this one to Butcher and Blackbird, but it's not entirely the book's fault. I still blame the book a little bit, but it's also partially my fault as well as the person who recommended me this book. Do I remember who that was? No. However, here we are. The book, it was disappointing not because it was necessarily a bad book. It was pretty well written, in my opinion. I liked her writing style. It was funny. It was pitched to me as a serial killer rom-com. And when I think rom-com, I don't think dark romance. So when no one tells me it's a dark romance and I go into reading it and I'm like, oh, that was someone's eyeball. What did you do to the ice cream? It was wild. It was a time and a half. I rated it 3 stars. I still sit on that rating. I would recommend it to other people who read dark romance as a regular thing. I don't know if I would recommend it to people like my sister who come to me for romance recs, because I don't think that that's the kind of romance that me and my siblings go for. So we're gonna go with that. An underdog book of the year. I have 2 for this one because you could not make me choose a single thing ever. You make me choose. That's gonna be a very uncomfortable situation for you, not for me, for you. Anyways, the first one I have is Bride by Ellie Hazelwood. I am an Ellie Hazelwood apologist. Anything this woman writes, I will rate it 4 stars and above. Except for 1, but that's none of your business. If you don't know anything about this book, it follows Misery Lark, who's a vampire, in a world that's basically just a parallel universe of ours, where humans, werewolves, and vampires are like the main 3 territories in the world. And she is the daughter of the head of the vampires, and she basically gets married away in this peace treaty thing that they do I don't remember how many years. And so she marries the alpha of the werewolves, and the romance develops from there. And when I tell you, I love this. Now, if you don't know anything about me, I talk about this sometimes, but I try not to remember this time period of my life. I was in the trenches of Wattpad, in the Omegaverse Wattpad in AO3. People talk about Wattpad. No one talks about the trenches of AO3. So when I heard that Ali Hazelwood was coming out with a paranormal romance that was loosely Omegaverse based, I was scared. Because I love Ali Hazelwood. I do not love the trenches I crawled out of. I crawled out of their trenches. And so, take a shot every time I say trenches. Actually, no. You might get alcohol poisoning. And I'm not going to be responsible for your death. However, I was scared. This is delightful. I rated it 4.25 stars. And I stand on it. It's really good. I really liked it. And I was very surprised by it, to be honest with you. The next book that was an underdog for me this year was a book that I borrowed from my sister, and that was, so I don't have the copy of it, but it was Lilith by Nikki Marmory. It is a literary fiction, historical fiction, that is basically the creation story and the story of creation through the point of view of Lilith. And that's a really interesting story to begin with, because as we know, the story is told from the perspective of Adam and Eve and how they were made in the Garden of Eden. I'm a Christian, obviously, hello, and I really liked it. You have to not take it seriously, because I feel that's a big beef a lot of people have with it, is that it's offensive to it's basically heresy. And I guess you could take it that way if you put more weight into words than what they are. They are just words. And the story itself is a really good feminist retelling of like how Lilith did these things for these people, and it all got credited to a man. And that's basically just talking about society as a whole, how we are of the patriarchal standing. Fuck the patriarchy. But it's just a really beautiful story of how she falls in love through over thousands and thousands of years, and how she does all of these things for these people. And it's just a beautiful story. It is very slow. Now that I think about it, it is very slow, but I'll talk about that later. I rated it, and I'll talk about the rating later as well. But yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I didn't think I would, to be honest with you. Next is a book you loved in the moment but don't think about now. So I have 4 for this one, and I'm gonna have to ask you to mind your business, okay? Thank you. The first one is Phantasma by Kaylee Smith. I really enjoyed this in the moment. I thought Black Bell was phenomenal, but the more detached I am from actually reading it, and the more that I have time separated from being immersed in between these pages, the more I don't think about it, and the more that I don't feel like it really did much of anything, to be honest with you. I originally rated it 5 stars. Then I dropped it to 4.5. Now it comfortably sits at 3.75. I don't hate it. I actually really enjoyed it. I would recommend it to people who want a fast-paced, spicy, from like, this is classified as horror. That is a lie. That is a bald-faced lie. This is not horror. This is like spicy romantasy, or like, I don't even know how to describe it. It's just like not that, but anyways, all of that to say, this book follows Ophelia, and in the beginning of this book, her mother is murdered. How it is. And her family is a family of necromancers, so they can talk to spirits, phantoms. Okay. And there are these people called the Devils, and they basically run this game that comes around every 100 years or so, and it's called Phantasma. And you basically go through the 9 circles of hell to get to the end, where you ask the head of all devils, you get a wish granted. And Ophelia's sister Genevieve was like, you should, like, what if we could save, they're going through some financial struggles, and so Genevieve was like, what if we do that and use the wish to fix everything? And Ophelia's like, absolutely not, you are so wrong for that, how, I don't understand why you ever, blah, 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 blah. And then her sister runs off to Phantasma, and so Ophelia goes after her, and in order to find her sister, because they aren't in the same, like, thing, I don't even know how to explain it, she has to go through the circles of hell, and she makes a deal with Blackwell to get through it to see her sister. And it's pretty heartwarming how much she cares about her sister. However, there is heavy OCD representation in this, which in theory is a good thing, but I have heard from a lot of people who have OCD as well, and the author also has OCD, but a lot of people who were reading it who have OCD were like, this was really triggering for me, and I feel like there should have been more warning on how graphic, like, depictions of OCD would be. And so I don't know, if you have OCD, I would check the author's note as well as check warnings from people online who are in the same boat as you, and make sure that you are able to read this safely. All of that to say, I don't think about it much anymore. Wow, I talk too much. Any hoozles. The next book I don't think about that much is Crossing the Line by Heather Garvin. I read this in February, and honestly, until I was answering the questions for this video, I completely forgot that I read it. I don't think about it at all. I couldn't tell you a singular thing about what happens in it besides that they get on a train and go somewhere. I'm not entirely sure anymore. And that is quite literally it. I don't remember anything. I remember that the third act conflict was dumb. And I am remembering I rated it 4 stars, but I think I overinflated my rating. And so I'm gonna say it's 3 stars at the most. And we're gonna leave it at that. Then the one I don't think about that much is Lilith. Like I mentioned earlier, I don't really think about it that much after I read it. It was really slow, and it was really hard to hold on to things to get going through the book, so I was like trudging through, and I feel like it just doesn't sit with you the way you think it would. Like, I don't think about it at all. Honestly, again, one of those books I forgot that I read this year until I was making this video. And so I feel like I would recommend it to certain people, but I also don't think about it enough to give that, like, oh, I love this book, you know? And then the last one is The Night Ends with Fire by K.X. Song. This is a book about, it's basically a Mulan retelling, but in a fantasy realm. So Mulan is just a woman who goes to the army as a man to save her father and her country.
Dishonor on you! Dishonor on your cow!
And her family, and gets discovered, whatever. This one is that, but there is a magic system involving jade crystals and a dragon spirit who can't be trusted. Should I trust him? And a romance is involved. It was fine. I don't think about it often because it felt really lackluster. I'm a person who grew up on Disney movies and who grew up on the story of Mulan. Mulan was my favorite, it is my favorite Disney movie. I love that story, so I know it front to back, up and down. It's crazy. And I read this book expecting to love it, not as much, but to love it, and I just kind of liked it. When I originally rated it, I rated it 4.75, and I think that was, and then later I changed it to 3.75. I think I inflated it a whole star because I loved Mulan so much, and to have those snippets of Mulan in this story was really what got me through it. Everything else was just kind of lackluster, really just not worth a lot of effort to read, and it was pretty long, and I don't know. It felt like it was trying to do too many things at one time. It was trying to be a fantasy. It was trying to tell the story of Mulan. It was trying to tell a romance. It was trying to build this magic system to build up for another book. And it felt like there was just too much happening for it to do any of them well. And so I would recommend it if you want a pretty easy read. I wouldn't recommend it if you want a book that's going to mean something to you. Next question is a book that surprised you. Again, I have two, because why wouldn't I have two? The first one is Magnolia Parks by Jessa Hastings. Now, I've talked about my journey with Magnolia Parks before. As we all know, I first read it, DNF'd it at 7%, and then I reread it. It was the reread that surprised me because I got so invested in these characters and I got so invested in their story and the heartbreak, the hurt, the yearning. Anyways, this book really surprised me this year. I never thought I would like this series, especially after the first time I tried to read it, and I love it so much. I think about these characters often, and a part of my heart lives with the box set in London. 100%. The next book that surprised me is actually Zodiac Academy by Caroline Peckham and Suzanne Valenti. The reason this surprised me is because one of the tropes is bullying romances. And listen, I was bullied my whole life. I don't like bullying. I think it's unnecessary to most plots. However, I love this book. I love the series. I literally was recommended this. I could literally ask Sal, who's sitting right here on my phone. She literally said, I want you to read it even though I think you're going to hate it. And I loved it. I rated this 5 stars. Now, Larry Reeds also read this series. She has non-spoiler and spoiler vlogs on her channel. You should go check it out. And she even rated this like 3.75, 3.5. I don't remember what she rated it. But it was not a high rating. But the rest of the series was 5 stars. I rated this 5 stars. I think I'm unwell. I think I need therapy. But I think that's also none of your business or my business at this point. I just realized I didn't tell you a single thing about either of those books. So Magnolia Parks is about following Magnolia and BJ in London high society. It's basically Gossip Girl meets London high society. It's that, but it's so much more. It follows their story of heartbreak, and they're basically childhood lovers who went through this immense hurt of their relationship, and it's basically them finding each other kind of again, like trying to forgive one another and build on that and try to move forward. And then at the end of this book it just all falls apart because these are real people making real decisions, and it's really, really hard. And so I would definitely check trigger warnings for this series, but I love it so much. Zodiac Academy. This series follows Tori and Darcy, who are changelings, who basically they are fae who were switched at birth with human children to save their lives. And they are twins who are of the land of Solaria, like that's where they're originally from, and they are found in a Chicago apartment by Orion. And they basically are taken back to Solaria so they can go to Zodiac Academy to learn how to harness their powers, learn who they are, and maybe someday take the throne. That's literally all I'm going to tell you because otherwise I will spoil it because I won't shut up. But anyways, a book that you can't stop recommending. Now, I've talked about these books before, so this will surprise literally nobody. The first book I can't stop recommending is Legendborn by Tracy Deonn. So good. This story follows Bree Matthews, who is a black woman who is 16 years old, who is going to like an early college program at is it South Carolina or North Carolina? North Carolina. I was so wrong. It's UNC Chapel Hill, and she goes there because that is her escape from what happened to her mom, and her mom dies in the beginning of this book. It's not a spoiler, literally in the first 10 pages. And she discovers this Arthurian society and a secret society, and finds out all of these things she never knew before. And it's just a powerful story of her discovering herself, her culture, her ancestors, the way that her mother cared for her, and I will never stop recommending The Legendborn Cycle by Tracy Deonn. This book, 5 stars. The second book, Bloodmarked, 6 stars. I will never stop recommending this series. The third one, it's going to be a trilogy. The third and final installment of this series comes out March 4th. When I tell you I will be inconsolable, I will be unreachable, no one will be able to talk to me. We will have a book shopping video just so I can grab that book. I swear on my life, I will be doing nothing but reading that book. No matter what. No matter what. The next book I can't stop recommending is Assistant to the Villain by Hannah Nicole Mayweather. This is a low-stakes fantasy rom-com that is slow burn, aka first and second book not together. If that third book Hannah, I'm looking at you, girl. Anyways, this follows Evie Sage, who is pretty clumsy, as well as just doesn't fit in anywhere quite well, and she one day runs into the villain in the woods trying to escape the Valiant Guard, and he basically asks her to be his assistant, and because he's attracted to her, and it's just like this whole thing, and it's so good, it's so silly, it's so funny. It means literally nothing in the sense of, like, the stakes are so low. Like, it's so funny. It's just a comedy. It really is. And Kingsley, this little frog that has a little sign, is the best side character I've ever read in my entire life. I have never loved a side character more than I love Kingsley. He is the funniest, like, comedic relief in between all of the serious moments, and so I highly, highly, highly recommend this series, always. Next, we're gonna get into my favorite book couples of the year. Now. Will these surprise anybody? No. If they surprise you, we need to have a conversation, because I literally never shut up. One of these is a if you know you know type beat. The rest of them are just here, and they're great. First one is Blue Lance. If you know you know, from Zodiac Academy. If you know, you know. If you know, you know. Ugh. Anyways, I'm gonna say nothing else. The next is Justin and Emma from Just for the Summer. Justin, the man you are. You are the perfect man for me, honestly. But the perfect man for Emma. I love her. Abby Jimenez really knows how to write a man and knows how to write a down bad man. That's the key, ladies, is a down bad man. Just for all of those who are hoping to write romance novels, a down bad man, a man who would do anything and everything that is not required of somebody for this person because they love them. The perfection in a bottle. Just give me a groveling man and I am sat. And that is Justin. Next is Harlow and Shep. Harlow Sutherland and Shepard Ford from Stay in Your Lane by LF Sun. I love them. Again, definition of down bad man. He loves her. I don't think I can describe how much love is in that book. Like, real, raw, emotional love. I'm down bad for that couple. And then would this be an Ollie video without mentioning By the Orchid and the Owl? And that would be Rena and Cohen, which is kind of an if you know you know, but not really. I love Rena. She's such a strong female character, and I love her values and how she values the people around her. And Cohen is such a hurt individual who is doing the absolute best that he can, and I just love him so much. Rena and Cohen. My Babies Forever. Anyways. New favorite authors discovered this year. This will surprise literally nobody. These have no order because simply you couldn't ask me. Okay? Couldn't ask me. Tracy Dion, Mariah Montoya, L.F. Sun, Jessa Hastings, Hannah Nicole Mayrer, and S.K. Horton. Now, I've talked about the first few. S.K. Horton is a very recent discovery, as in like 3 days ago. She's the author of The Concealed, which I'll talk about later in this video. And she's phenomenal. And she's such a sweetie pie. I literally love her. She made a reel. I got approved for an arc, which I'm currently reading, called The Captured, which is the second book to Concealed. And I'm live texting her in her DMs, just like, what do you mean? Excuse me? I beg your finest pardon. And she made a reel out of my live tweeting, and I think that is the sweetest thing ever, and I'm just so thankful to have discovered her as an author. And so anyways, but yeah, those are my new favorite authors. All of them are auto-buy. My bank account is broken. The happiest book you read this year. This one I have two, because obviously we're going to actually come back to this pile and we're going to re-grab Assisted to the Villain. Like I said, this is just a silly book, and I left this book feeling giddy, and I laughed the whole time. I was reading it and I was laughing out loud the whole time and my mom was like, what are you laughing at? And I said, my book. And I had her read it, and she laughed the whole time. It's such a silly book. I love it so much. The next book is another cult favorite that everyone knows, that everyone loves, or if you don't love it, you know I love it, and that is Love on the Brain by Miss Allie Hazelwood. Again, this is an Allie Hazelwood house. If you're mad about it, I'm sorry. No, I'm not. I love her. This is my favorite book by her that she's ever written. I've read this book 3 times, and it never gets boring to me. I think about Levi and B all the time. This book follows Levi and B, and they're both scientists at NASA. Well, Levi is a employee at NASA, and B is an employee at someone else's lab she's a neuroscientist, and she gets called to NASA to work on a helmet to help astronauts. I don't quite remember, but that doesn't even matter, to be honest. And they were in college together, and she thinks that he hates her because he was cold to her. And girl, the tea that conspires. It's so good. This is so good. And I need you to mind your business that I love this book. People worry that like the STEMinist series, this is the second book in her STEMinist series, which is The Love Hypothesis, Love on the Brain, and then Love Theoretically. People worry that this series you have to like know a shit ton about science to understand it. You don't. Not even a little bit. And I think that that's glorious. And so I think everyone should read this interconnected standalone series. You can read them out of order. This is not one that you have to read in order. The only thing I say about this is you have to read The Love Hypothesis before you read Love Theoretically, because of the cameo that happens from Olive and Adam in Love Theoretically. It just hits so much harder if you read The Love Hypothesis before Love Theoretically. But if you read this one first, I would read this one first, then The Love Hypothesis, then Love Theoretically. Because listen, this is my favorite. And on the opposite end of the scale from that is the saddest book you read this year. I have 3. Now, before I go into this, I need everyone to collectively agree that I am a crier. I cry at everything. And so these are books that I was so I cry at everything, so otherwise this list would be really long. So these are the books I was inconsolable at the end of these books. I was inconsolable. One of them, I was on FaceTime with Sal, and I was sobbing. deeply distraught. But that's none of my business. The first is Stay in Your Lane by LF Sun. This is the one I was distraught over FaceTime for. This is a romance, but it's so much more than that. It follows Harlow Sutherland, who is a swimmer for a college professional swimmer and a top athlete, and she gets an injury that almost ruins her career. And so she, at the beginning of this book, and so she has to go through physical therapy and training. Basically, she's shunned by her coach for getting an injury, which starts with the emotional turmoil that's going on. And Shepard Fords is a lifeguard at the rec center where she's training, and he has noticed her for the past 4 weeks that she's been going there at the beginning of this book, and it just goes from there. I can't even tell you anything without spoiling it, because I want you to know literally nothing. I need you to go into this knowing absolutely nothing other than it is a swimmer romance, because of how much it will destroy your soul, but in the best way. I will say, I would check content warnings on this because it does deal with domestic violence. Not heavily on page, but enough to where it could trigger somebody. And so I would check warnings, as well as just check in with yourself while reading this book. If it's getting too heavy, don't finish it. Which, that I'll be sad about it, but also you need to take care of you. But I was deeply distraught by the end of this book. It had a happy ending. It had a good ending. It did have a happily ever after ending, but like, anyways, I was deeply distraught. So, there's that. The next one's actually a reread this year, and that would be The Fault in Our Stars by John Green. I don't know why I do this to myself, but every once in a while I'll just be like, I need to reread The Fault in Our Stars. I need to feel something again. And so I whipped it out, and boy howdy, I felt something. If you go on my Goodreads, you'll see that I read this and there's no rating on it. This is one of those books that I fear I will never be able to rate, because of what it means to me and because of what I feel for this book. This book follows Hazel Lancaster and Augustus Waters. And Hazel Lancaster has a terminal cancer that sits in her lungs, and so it's hard for her to do a lot of things like a normal teenager. And she meets Augustus Waters through a support group, and it basically just follows the story of friendship, love, and loss. And I feel like everyone knows this story. Everyone's either seen the movie or read the book, and I have no words. John Green really did it with this one for me, and I will never not be hurt by this story. The last one is actually Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. Now, I need you to listen here. Listen here. The third act in this is what destroyed me just a little bit. And it's because it made so much sense for these characters. And I was so, like, I was literally this is the book that made my mother concerned for my well-being. And here's why. Because I was sitting on the couch reading it. I had it on my Kindle originally, and then I bought a physical copy because I loved it so much. I was sitting on the couch reading it on my Kindle, and the third act happened. I put my Kindle down and I start viscerally sobbing. Couldn't breathe, couldn't stop crying, was literally so distraught. And my mom was like, "Oh, is it a bad book?" And I said, "No, it's a really good book." She was so confused. And I think that just sums up this book for me. This hit a part of my soul that has never been touched before this book. It has been touched since this book, but it has not been touched like that before this book. And it's so good. But it was one of the saddest books I've ever read because of what happens. Fuck. Next question is the most frustrating book you read. Now, okay. I know I mentioned this earlier, but I'm going to mention it again. Magnolia Parks. I'm not going to go into it. It's toxic. It's whatever. That's why it was frustrating. That does not mean I didn't love it. I loved this mess, but it was a mess. The second book that was the most frustrating this year was Treasure Island by Robert Stevenson, I think is his name. Don't quote me on that. I'll put whatever here. The best way to describe it is that it is the original pirate story. It really did monumental things for pirates in books. However, that was the most boring book I've ever read in my life. For a book about swashbuckling pirates, what do you mean you're that boring? I was falling asleep reading this book, and I have never been more frustrated with a pirate story. I was like, why are you so boring when you're about pirates? Anyways, that's all of that. The longest book you read this year. The longest book I read this year was Zodiac Academy 3, The Reckoning, which had 564 pages in it. And Zodiac Academy 3 just continues the story. I'm not telling you a single thing about it because that's spoilers. But that's gonna sit over there because this pile is kind of scaring me. And on the flip side of that, the shortest book I ever read this year. Now, if we're going to include novellas, that would be The Exception to the Rule by Christina Lauren. I loved it. That was such a fun little novella. I don't remember much about it, but I remember just being like, oh, that's so cute, you know? So that was the shortest book I read technically, and that was on my Kindle. But if we're going off non-novellas, it would be The Naturals by Jennifer Lynn Barnes, specifically the first book in the Natural series. The Exception to the Rule was 101 pages. The Naturals is 302 pages long. A book you haven't stopped thinking about. I have 3. It is just how it be at this point. The first one is the most recent that I can't stop thinking about is The Concealed by S.K. Horton. Because what do you mean? This was written true YA. Like, this is for the 12 to 18-year-old range. Why am I 20 and I'm loving this book? Why am I 20 and I'm eating it up? Why am I out of the age range for this book and I rated it 5 stars? Technically 4.75, but 5 stars on Goodreads. I literally can't even explain to you what I love about this book. It's just the perfect for me. I am the target audience. I'm not, but I am. And that's all. That's literally it. Next one. Stay in Your Lane by L.F. Sun. I think about Harlow and Shepard at least once a day. I've been thinking about this cover since I read the book, and I am so thankful that I have it in my hands. I am dying. I love this book so much. And next is obviously By the Orchid and the Owl by Mariah Montoya. If you don't know what this book is about, it is following Raina Dre. Wow, couldn't remember her last name. Raina Dre, and she lives in this world where they have magical powers, but the way that they get them is by going to the Echelon Institute, which is the name of the series. By going to the Echelon Institute and getting basically branded by this fairy metal that comes from the mountain. And that is how they gain magical powers. And it just follows her story in discovering all of these secrets about her mother, about her family, and falling in love with Cohen Steeler, obviously, and just connecting with the different characters. And Emile, I still don't know how to pronounce her name, but I love her so much, and I love the found family in this book with everything in me. I simply cannot sing this book's praises enough, and I think about this every day, at least once a day, probably more than once a day. Next is an unpopular book that you loved. Again, I'm going to whip out The Concealed. This says The Captured because that's what I'm currently reading, but S.K. Horton, The Concealed, no one's talking about it. Like, I heard literally nothing about it until I signed up for the ARC. And I need that to change. I need everyone to go read The Concealed. I need everyone to support S.K. Horton. She is such a sweetie. I adore her with everything in me. Her books her writing style is so fast paced. It's really entertaining. It's just delightful. I need everyone to go read it right now. Thank you and good day. It's on Kindle Unlimited, and I think it's like $5.99 if you buy it on Amazon for your Kindle. So I'm just saying. Go support indie authors. Love you. Book with the most unique concept. I have 3, obviously, and I've already talked about them, so I'm not going to rehash what they're about. But that would be Lilith by Nikki Marmory. Obviously, the creation story told through the lens of Lilith is a pretty unique concept. Phantasma by Kylie something. I don't know. The book is buried and I don't feel like finding it. Going Through the 9 Circles of Hell for a Wish with a necromancer. That's kind of cool. And then The Night Ends with Fire by KX Song. Just the way that the Mulan story was retold, as well as the magic system, was just very unique and a very interesting use of like Chinese legend and Chinese mythology. I think that was really cool. Highest and lowest rated books that you read on Goodreads, and do you agree? My highest that I read on Goodreads was Stay in Your Lane by LF Sun, and that was an average of 4.65. And I just want to say, duh. This is a 6-star book for me. Of course, I agree that it should be my highest rated on my TBR. Or on my, not my TBR, on my red shelf. I say nothing else. The lowest rated on my TBR is actually A Court of Animal Dreams by H. Wolf. I think it's H. Wolf or A.H. Wolf. I'm not entirely sure. But its average rating on Goodreads is 3.28, and I personally rated it like 3.75. So I kind of agree. I don't know. I read it a while ago. I had the arc of the first book. I currently have the arc of the second book. I'm very thankful to have this opportunity. And I read the first book, and it was good. It was fine, you know? Like, there was some things that I was just like, that's a bit repetitive. I don't need you to say that again. But other than that, it was a really good read. And so I don't know that I agree with it being 3.28 as the average rating. But I agree that it wasn't the best thing I've ever read. But I also really enjoyed it. I don't know. So I kind of agree, kind of disagree. I don't know. That feels pretty harsh for that book, honestly. Favorite quotable books. Magnolia Parks, Cut Me and I Bleed Him. Anyways, Stay in Your Lane. I'm not. The quote that I have in my head is a spoiler, so I'm not going to. The Concealed by S.K. Horton. You Captured Me. I'm gripping this table. Oh, I love S.K. Horton. I love her. Love her. And Just for the Summer. Examples. Why did you come? Because you needed me, he said simply. I will always come when you call. This one's a little bit of a spoiler, so if you haven't read Just for the Summer, I suggest you skip ahead 30 seconds or so, and then continue the video. My heart shattered into a million pieces. If you had asked me yesterday, I would have said it was her. Instead, she'd end up being the one that got away. Not a soulmate, just the love of my life. And unfortunately, they are not the same thing. That is the part that had me viscerally sobbing on the couch to my mother. Books I would reread. I'm 100% rereading By the Orchid and the Owl by Mariah Montoya, because hopefully she releases the next one next year. I need it. I will also be doing a reread of Legendborn and Bloodmarked in honor of Oathbound coming out on March 4th, so I can relive the story and be fresh in it for Oathbound. I'm so excited. I'm so excited. And then in the new year, I will be doing a buddy reread of the Magnolia Parks universe with my friend Sal as well as Jordan. Sal is waving. That will be an emotional roller coaster, to say the least. I will also be rereading Stay in Your Lane. probably, most likely. I have no idea. But if the second in this series comes out next year, L, please, I will be rereading in preparation for an even more emotional turmoil that will. Anyways, Goodreads reading goal and new goal for 2025. So my Goodreads reading goal this year was 60. I'm currently at 57 as I'm filming this. I will probably finish before the end of the year. But because of how much I struggled with 60 this year, I'm gonna keep it at 60 for next year. That way I can be consistent, as well as if I beat it, then I beat it. If I don't, then I don't. You know, I'm just gonna keep it at 60 for next year. I'm proud of myself for reading 60 this year. I didn't even think I could do that. In 2023, I think I read 4 books. So in 2024, reading 60, that's crazy. So I think I did really well this year, even if I'm still going in at the last minute on the last few of them. But yeah, that's my goal for next year. What will you prioritize in your reading journey in 2025? I am going to prioritize not brute forcing a slump. I had 2 major slumps this year. I had one during the summer and one that I just recently got out of. And both times I tried brute forcing it, and it only extended my slump longer than it should have been. And so I think next year, if I'm in a slump, I'm going to embrace the slump for a few weeks. And then if I'm still not reading anything, I will hop back in with like a reread or something that I know that I can get through quickly, so I could get in the groove of reading before trying to brute force it with something I know I'd like if I wasn't fresh out of a slump. I'm also going to prioritize producing content that I'm proud of. That's part of why I've been taking a break, is that I haven't really been proud of the content that I've been making. I'm proud of my editing and growth that I've made, but I haven't been really super proud of the content I've been posting, like on Instagram. I'm not proud of it. I barely post on Instagram, which is something I want to fix in the new year, as well as just being more authentic in my content. I feel like recently I've been trying, like especially my YouTube videos, I've been trying to be funny when I naturally am funny. When I force it, it comes out as forced. Funny how that works. When you force something, it comes out as forced. And I just want to be able to be authentic and just have a good time and be silly without it feeling like I have to be silly all the time. So those are my priorities for 2025. And that's the end of this video. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I hope you had a good time listening to me yap for an hour about books that I read this year and my answers to these questions that I got off the internet. I hope you guys really enjoyed it. I enjoyed talking about it. I love yapping. If anything, I am a yapper. So there's that. If you liked it, make sure to like and subscribe and turn on the bell notifications. That way you are notified when I upload in the future. If you want more content, I do have an Instagram. It is at OllieReads34. I mainly post on my story, but I have been trying to post more, so we'll see how well I get on that. Any hoozles. I also have a TikTok. I'll link it below because I don't remember what my username is, but I haven't posted anything on it yet. But if you want to see what comes in the future, you can go follow and do that. I also have a Goodreads and a Storygraph and a Fable. I will link all of them down below. I don't really use Fable anymore. It kind of ticks me off a little bit, but that's none of my business. I started reusing Goodreads again because I liked I don't know, man. I am a creature of habit. And then I started using Storygraph, and I really liked how it told me how many pages I've read this year. So I'm really excited about that and getting to use that one more. But I will link them all down below. I hope to see you guys in the next one. Bye!